Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran asking your nephew how to upload music videos onto your Facebook page, or else a scrappy upstart deleting your Facebook page to only release hand-numbered cassettes, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the first Friday of December 2020, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Sven who drove a Mazda Miata with a trailer hitch welded to the bumper because he was always fencing pallets of Monster energy drink that his cousin stole from AMC movie theaters. And old Sven would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We can have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. Everything that you need is there: hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates. You can sell your merch there. They have mailing list tools. They have fan subscription features that you can use. Listeners to the Working Songwriter podcast can go to bandzoogle.com and try it for free for 30 days. Simply use the promo code TWS to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming months, every single Sunday night, I'm over on YouTube for Sunday Songs at 9 p.m. Eastern. It is a live stream. I will be live. I am live every week. That means I'll be playing some of my tunes. That also means that I take questions and requests from people in the live chat. It's really become a fun, interactive experience. We're certainly building a community over there on Sunday nights, including many listeners to this podcast. So come on over and be a part of it. Head over to YouTube, type in Joe Pug, subscribe to my channel, and then every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'll play some tunes for you. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you dig. You just head to their site, Patreon, you search for The Working Songwriter, or you search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription. A subscription that you certainly don't have to pay, but that you just choose to pay because you dig the show and what it's all about. If just 1% of the listeners of our show would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make a huge difference. So thanks to everybody who's done that. And if you're not in a position to do that, I totally get it. You can still help the show out entirely for free. The first way that you could do that is you could leave us a review in the iTunes store. That's free. Or you could also just tell a friend about the show. Spread the word about the show. The simple math on those last two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. That's all the harassment I have for you this week. Our guest this week needs no introduction. He's a stone cold legend. Can't believe we got him on the show. This is going to be so great. I hope you enjoy our talk. Our guest this week is a pioneer of Americana music. Dave Alvin was fusing country, folk, rock, and blues music before there was a market-tested name for it. He was the guitarist and principal songwriter for The Blasters, an influential roots rock band formed with his brother Phil that was based out of the fertile Los Angeles music scene of the 1980s alongside X, Black Flag, and the Gun Club. You can sum up that band's eclectic sound by noting that in a single month they once toured with The Cramps, Asleep at the Wheel, and Queen. Dave Alvin left the band in 1986 after a number of years of hard touring and went the solo route. He has since released a string of critically acclaimed solo albums and has lent his guitar talents to the likes of X, The Knitters, Ramblin' Jack Elliott, and The Derailers, just to name a few. Other artists have scored hits covering his songs, including Buckwheat Zydeco and Dwight Yoakam. He's recorded for Columbia, Rhino, and Yep Rock Records. His album, Public Domain, Songs from the Wild Land, won a Grammy for Best Contemporary Folk Album in the year 2000. He's a published poet with 2 collections of poetry to his name. The New York Times has said of him, years before most rockers discovered the plight of the working man, Dave Alvin was writing eloquent songs about small towns and hard times. Rolling Stone has called him an under-recognized guitar hero, and No Depression has said that it ain't easy to drop a lasso around Dave Alvin's neck and rope him into a musical chorale. Dave's got a new album out of unreleased recordings entitled From an Old Guitar, so he's out doing the press rounds, and it's an absolute honor to have him here on our plucky little podcast. We jumped on the phone earlier this week, and he told me about his journey so far. Mr. Dave Alvin, thank you so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. It's much appreciated. For a fellow like you who has spent many decades on the road, the last 8 months must have felt particularly strange. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. In 2019, I was on tour for 10 months between various projects. And so 2020 has been the polar opposite. And, I actually, when the sun is up, I'm really digging being at home. It's really nice. And, I have this 100-year-old Spanish house, and I've got my own little hillside, and I'm really lucky, and I'm really thankful. And it's like, oh yeah, this is why I work all the time, And but I have to say, when the sun goes down, I start jonesing, It's like, where's the gig? Where's the band? Where's the man? Where's the venue? Where are we? What city am I in? I do miss it,
Where's the horrible catering?
Catering?
Pardon me. Where's the $20 buyout? Yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
So, man, I don't know if you're one to really look in the rear view mirror much, but it sounds like 2020 might be a year for it. The last couple of days I've spent looking in the rear view mirror for you, getting ready for this interview. And it turns out you've done a bunch of shit, man. Do you know that over the last 40 years? You've like worked all the time, man. I mean, where does that drive kind of come from?
Pay the mortgage. No, it's a lot of reasons, I'm really, again, I don't mean to sound Pollyanna-ish, but I'm a really lucky guy, I have, there's been a lot of hard times and all that, but overall I've managed to somehow survive in the music industry for 40 years doing whatever I want,
Yeah.
And it hasn't, like I said, it hasn't been easy, and it's not always, pain-free. But especially in the past 20-some years, when I switched over to labels like High Tone for many years, and now the past, 12, 15 years, I've been with Yep Rock Records, and that they know that I'm an oddball. Both those labels, and they allowed me to grow and and try things that maybe, well, not maybe, I know major labels don't let artists like me try. I've had enough friends that signed, major label deals, and there's pluses to that, but the minus is, if your first record doesn't sell X amount of copies, you're history.
Right.
And they're not going to take time to develop a Bob Dylan or a Bruce Springsteen anymore, or even a Miles Davis. They're just not going to do it. It's not in their business profile or their business plan. Develop this guy into an artist that could make strange music. No,
right.
Give us some hits, man. And and I went through that when the Blasters were signed to Warner Brothers Records, and I went through that when I was a member of X, and they were signed to Elektra Records, and then worst of all, I went through it when I was signed to CBS Records in the late '80s. And after those experiences, I was like, I need to find a place. If I'm going to advance as a songwriter, as a performer, as a musician, if I'm going to grow, I need to be at a place where I don't have to explain what I'm doing all the time. So does that answer your question?
It does. It does. Yeah. I mean, just the idea of having to explain what you're doing all the time, it's such a drag doing that. Mm-hmm. It just in the sense of it takes a lot of energy to do that. And that should be energy that should be put into the writing or the mix or the whatever, but you're having to chop that off and spend it on kind of on spinning your wheels.
Yeah. And once you, as an artist, once you come to the realization of what, where you're comfortable, I know people that have been with major labels for years that sold a lot of records, and they're comfortable. They know how to work in that, in that system. I don't really, Yeah. I'm an odd songwriter. I'm an odd duck all around, and I don't, I realized around 1990, when I signed with Hightone, I realized that, hey, you know what? You're never going to have a hit record, mm-hmm. Because back in the Blaster days, and even with X, and even with my first solo record, there was always that sort of, yeah, we could do this. And with the Blasters, we did have some respectable radio results, nothing groundbreaking, but, we did all right. And, but yeah, it was about 1990, I realized, well, I'm never going to have a hit. I'm never going to play an arena with my name on it. It's just never going to happen. So let's not play that game. And don't pretend that it is going to happen. And it was like a big goddamn weight had been taken off my shoulder. It was like, I can write whatever song I want. I don't have to, go to A&R meetings and describe what I'm thinking. I mean, there was one guy, I was signed to CBS. It's a long story that I won't bore you with, but I was signed to CBS Nashville for my first solo record, which I had made independently, on my own, and then they licensed it and signed me to the label, and it didn't work out that well, because they were trying to make me into a country act, and I'm like, well, I'm certainly influenced by country music, but I'm a rock and roller, and and so then eventually they moved me over to CBS Pop, which was based in New York and LA, and I remember going into an A&R meeting with an A&R man who will remain nameless, and I played him, I was there to play him some new songs that I'd written, and I played this one song, and the guy, they were so, I don't even know, they were so sensitive about anything with me regarding country. And so I played this song, and the guy goes, that first chord you played, what chord is that? And this is a true story. And I said, it's a G chord. That's a country chord. Can you change it to something else? And I was like, it's just a G chord. It's in every type of music. It's in blues. It's in classical music. It's in jazz. It's a G chord, you know?
Oh, man.
And, you know, but I'd had a lot of experiences like that, like with Warner Brothers, you know, and we were signed by Lenny Waronker, who was a really wonderful guy.
Yeah.
And I have nothing but respect for Lenny. But his A&R staff, maybe not so much. And so we were working on this Blasters album called Hardline, and I'd written a song called Kathleen. And the recorded version of it is my favorite recording of the Blasters ever. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those rare times that it captured what we were like live.
Yeah.
And so I was very proud. You know, it's a good song, but a great performance. And so I go to Warner Brothers, and we have this A&R meeting, and we're playing the tracks because we were in the studio, you know, recording them. So I'm playing the tracks, and we get to that song, Kathleen, and I had this, you know, sonically, it's like an amped up version of the kind of tracks that, you know, Fats Domino and Little Richard were doing down at Cosmo Matassa's studio in New Orleans in the 50s. And Lee Allen, who played the sax solos on all those records, was our sax player, our musical mentor. So he's on this song, Kathleen, and I play it, and it's rocking, you know, and it's rolling, and it's doing everything I wanted it to do, you know, musically and sonically, and the band is just on fire. Get to the end, and the A&R guy goes, "Man, that can't go on the record." And I was like, "Why not?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, it sounds too much like the Blasters." So anyway, so finding a home at places like High Tone for several years, and then you know, now, you know, Yep Rock is a wonderful label for me. You know, I can do, like I said, I can do whatever I want, and I'm really lucky, and that's rare.
It's funny. I think like with major labels, they probably run into the same problem that all big companies run into, which you at a certain point, you just get a level of bureaucracy when there's a meeting, people feel like they have to say something in the meeting just to justify their job. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then you end up with a bunch of shit like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's true. You know, I mean, because it's the definition of A&R person has changed drastically over the decades, you know, where in, let's say the 30s and 40s, an A&R guy would be closely, if you were an act like, you know, Bing Crosby, let's say, or even Sinatra, you know, the A&R guy would be helping you choose songs, picking the arranger, you know, booking the studio, basically kind of acting as a record producer does now. Mm. And, but then A&R morphed into talent scout, right. You know, and that's a crapshoot, you know, it's a job I would never want to have because the people I would sign, you know, may not sell 8 million records, you know, and you had visionary A&R men, you know, like John Hammond at Columbia Records, you know, who brought in, you know, everybody from Billie Holiday and Count Basie and Bessie Smith to, you know, Bob Dylan and Springsteen and all that. But they're few and far between, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you mentioned crapshoot, like it definitely is. I think about the NFL draft, and there's all these tens of millions of dollars on the line, and there's all these different metrics that they can, you know, measure players by, which, you know, music doesn't even have. And even then you get to draft night and they're like, yeah, well, we got about 6 quarterbacks and we don't know which one of them's going to be good. You're like, how do you not know? So what has changed the most since your time in the business? What do you think has changed the most from when you started until now on the business end?
On the business end?
Yeah.
It's hard to say because so much has changed and yet so much remains the same. Mm. On the business end, you know, it's for a lot of acts that I know, younger acts, it's difficult for them to get a record deal, you know, a decent record deal, you know, and it's really hard to get a booking agent.
Yeah.
now. You know, booking agent's almost more difficult to get than a record deal, and so that's a big change. You know, but the changes that I see, are more in how music is consumed. You know, that's the biggest difference in how people listen to it and whether people take it seriously or not. And, and some, there's still a lot of people that do take it seriously, and everyone likes music, so that hasn't changed. But, I would say, it's in some ways, we've reached a point, we're kind of back in the era of 45s, except it's even more disposable now due to streaming and this, that, and the other, and I'm an album guy, and I like albums. And when I listen to somebody, I will listen to their whole album. And yes, some songs will pop up and go, God, that's a great song, and that's okay. That one's okay. Oh boy, that other one, boy, what a great song.
Yeah.
So when I first get into somebody, I listen to the album, and I don't know that that's necessarily how the bulk of people listen to music anymore. As artists, all we can do is do what we do. And we'll make an album and we'll try to make it cohesive and make it hang together, and so that it's not just a collection of 45s like some album from 1957.
Yeah, I mean, I've really noticed in the last 5 years, a lot of people talking to people on the road. They'll come out to a show, and this has been a pretty common thing. They'll be like, "Hey, my friend dragged me out to the show." And in the middle of the show, you played a song. I know that song. It's really good. And they had found it on a playlist, but they didn't associate that song with me. They associated it with like, the easy Sunday morning playlist. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. In some ways, we're just background music for a lot of people.
Sometimes.
And and I understand that. It's like we all got, cars that need to be repaired, and there's bills that need to be paid, and somebody got to clean up after the kids, and this, that, and the other, and everybody's got other stuff to do, than sit and and it's usually people make connections with artists in when they're teenagers or in their early 20s, and when they'll equate an artist to when they had their first kiss. It's like, oh, that song, that was playing when I kissed Jennifer the first time,
Right.
First girl I ever, and I respect that. I'm the same way. It's the reason why I don't get tired of playing, certain of my songs. I don't get tired of playing Marie Marie. I don't get tired of 4th of July. I just don't get tired of them, and because certain songs mean so much to people. And then, but I don't know that happens today. I just don't know. When you're an older adult, it's not, well, I heard that song when I went to the rehab facility, or I heard that song when I checked into the retirement home. It's just not the same. So part of this is totally off topic, but just part of being a live performer, especially when you have years of work behind you. You gotta, my opinion is you gotta pay respect to people's memories of it, and so, if my song makes you think of kissing Jennifer for the first time, and I can somehow for 4 or 5 minutes transport you back to being a 16-year-old kid again, great, fine, that's great, let's time travel,
Yes.
and then I'm going to play something new, maybe, or here's a song that's more obscure,
Totally.
but I think is just as good.
I've never.
So anyway, to answer your question, I don't know how the music industry's changed. So much has remained the same in that you need to have a publicist, you need a booking agent, certain rules, if you don't have a publicist, and you don't have a powerful publicist, you're dead in the water in some regards. You're not getting on TV. You're not getting, you're not going to get in your reviews into glossy magazines, things like that. And that hasn't changed since I've been in the music industry.
Yeah.
So the sort of core stuff just remains the same.
I feel like I'm starting to see the very, very, very beginning of that part of it softening a little bit. I really can see a way forward now in the next 5 to 10 years when it would be less necessary to have a publicist, just because you're finding people publishing stuff on their own to the web, and those, whether it be online shows or podcasts or whatever, those are starting to have the same cultural effect as some of the legacy media. So I totally agree with you that up until now that has held strong, but I feel like I'm really starting to see the glimpses of that being a dying thing, particularly in watching how the prices have started to come down.
The prices of publicists?
Yes. Yeah.
I haven't heard that. But yeah, I think, independent, when you're making independent music, where you're independent, let's say, of a major label, and you're independent of, let's say, a genre. Mm-hmm. It's not like, oh, he's a country guy, or he's a blues guy, he's a rock and roll, he's a heavy metal guy. If you're independent of all those, and I certainly think that word of mouth, however it's defined, whether it's just some guy saying to another guy, "Hey, have you heard this Joe Pug record?" Mm-hmm. Or whether it's somebody posting something on the internet. It certainly helps. It's not the same as I was talking with somebody, I can't remember who, but they were a major act, mm-hmm. and they were kvetching because they only had TV scheduled for one late night show. Mm-hmm. And the person was kvetching because, they were talking about how in the 70s you could appear, Saturday Night Live didn't just have whoever was top 40 like they do now.
Right.
They would pull oddballs, they'd pull on Leon Redbone. They'd put Leon Redbone on or this, that, and the other. And then suddenly Leon Redbone had a career,
right.
that lasted for decades. So this person that I was talking to was complaining that doesn't happen anymore. And if you only do one late night show, you're not making any impression. You have to do all of them, and then you have to do the morning shows. And the other. And at one point, I just kind of shut out what he was talking about. I was like, "Oh yeah, no, you don't have to tell me, pal." Because for guys like me and guys like you, it's hard. We don't get on TV, and for different reasons, and those sort of mainstream things are still at this point the most powerful thing.
They are.
Yeah, and I've certainly lived off of a lot of my career is based off of positive word of mouth, whether it's whether it was fanzines 25 years ago or blogs now.
No, definitely, but then again, with those shows, they are very powerful. But sometimes I wonder if it gets you an audience base that's a mile wide and an inch deep. Whereas, when it's spread word of mouth, when your best friend gives you the tape and you go see the show with just a couple hundred people there, like those fans tend to stick with you over the course of a pretty long time in a way that maybe more fair weather fans wouldn't.
Yeah, no, I agree overall, but I do think there are exceptions.
Yeah.
A few years back, I did a couple of songs for a TV show called Justified. Mm-hmm. And that really kind of kicked my career into a comparative overdrive.
Really?
Because I appear on the show,
Mm-hmm.
I play the song, it's a good song, and I picked up a lot of two types of fans through that. Was people that had never heard of me and like, who the hell is this guy?
Mm-hmm.
I like this. And then people that had like, oh yeah, that guy from the Blasters, yeah, I like that. Yeah. What record's that on? Blah blah blah. And so you can get lasting fans from traditional media, but I do agree with you that at some point it does have to that the people that find you either on their own or find you because they walked into a club like Fitzgerald's one night and you put on a great show, they'll hang around more for the long term. And I've been really again I'm doing my lucky man speech, but I've been really blessed in that from Blaster days onward, I've got a core of people that have gone through all the changes with me, and for that, again, I'm extremely grateful. And I think that there in oddball music and independent music like we play, there is a thing where, this is going to sound wacky, but there is a community. It's a communion between the audience and the artist. That's more intense, maybe, than if you're just seeing a top 40 band,
Mm-hmm.
And you can have a diverse crowd you could have lawyers and truck drivers and oil painters. You could have inside, they're all united by this kind of love and devotion to oddball roots music or independent music or whatever. And they tend to stick around because they've had experiences with you, either live or via records, that have gotten them out of bed in the morning. You know what I mean? It's like, because we all look for that. We all look for a reason to get out of bed, a reason to live, right?
Yeah.
And if one of your songs can give that to somebody, that's pretty powerful.
Have you ever had this happen to you? You casually mention to a friend that you're thinking of getting into gardening, and then the next time you open up your internet browser, you're bombarded with advertisements for, like, Mr. T Chia Pets and Miracle Grow. That phenomenon can be explained by the 21st century internet maxim, if you don't know what the product is, you are the product. Why is Google search free? Why is Facebook free? It's not because Silicon Valley invested billions of dollars in technology for you to have a better online experience. It's because when you use their services, your browsing history and online data become the product for them to sell to other companies to advertise to you. Well, to hell with that. Your online data should be private and yours alone. What do you need? You need a virtual private network that protects your online data. NordVPN runs in the background while you go about your online business and keeps your data private. It doesn't log any of your activity, and it encrypts your data to provide online anonymity. Listeners to the Working Songwriter Podcast can go to nordvpn.com/TWS, the initials of our show. That is nordvpn.com/TWS, and get 68% off. That's less than $4 a month. Help out our show and protect your data at the same time with NordVPN. Dave Alvin's career has spanned decades, genres, mediums, record labels, and entire music business paradigms. And yet, he's thrived across all of them. He's accomplished one of the toughest feats in the modern world: supporting himself for a lifetime with creative work. It's almost impossible. I'm sure he's had his share of ups and downs, but it's hard to listen to him now and not hear a sense of gratitude for his own creative path. There's a wonderful poem by W.S. Merwin that speaks of that sort of gratitude while also recognizing that life isn't entirely a bowl of cherries. That poem is entitled Thanks. Listen, with the night falling, we are saying thank you. We are stopping on the bridges to bow from the railings. We are running out of the glass rooms with our mouths full of food to look at the sky and say thank you. We are standing by the water thanking it, standing by the windows looking out in our directions. Back from a series of hospitals, back from a mugging, after funerals, we are saying thank you. After news of the dead, whether or not we knew them, we are saying thank you. Over telephones, we are saying thank you. In doorways and in the backs of cars and in elevators, remembering wars and the police at the door and the beatings on stairs, we are saying thank you. In the banks, we are saying thank you. In the faces of the officials and the rich and of all who will never change, we go on saying thank you, thank you. With the animals dying around us, taking our feelings, we are saying thank you. With the forests falling faster than the minutes of our lives, we are saying thank you. With the words going out like cells of a brain, with the cities growing over us, we are saying thank you faster and faster. With nobody listening, we are saying thank you. Thank you, we are saying and waving, dark though it is. One of the coolest things I think about your career has been the scene that you came out of in Los Angeles in the late 70s and early 80s was kind of a really special time for American music. It's like a recognizable kind of scene. Can you take me back to those days a little bit and talk about some of your contemporaries and what you learned from them and what you think they kind of learned from you and how you guys influenced one another?
Well, yeah, that was kind of... It was a great music scene. It had its downsides, like all music scenes do, but in general, the great thing about the LA scene in those days was it was a collection of people that didn't fit in anywhere, you know. They didn't fit into pop culture at that time. And some of them actually went on to influence pop culture. You know, the Go-Go's were just in the early days, they were a great drunk band. You know, I don't know how else to put it. They were great, you know, but they were not what they became, you know. And so, in the old LA days, you know, you would have it wasn't real strict stylistically, you know. Mm-hmm. You know, punk rock became very strict stylistically later on, where you had to sound like certain bands, and if you didn't sound like, let's say, you know, one of the great bands was Black Flag, but the side effect of Black Flag was everybody or certain people saying that's all that punk rock can be, mm-hmm. is Black Flag. Well, in the early days, it could be the Go-Go's. It could be, you know, there were great bands like the Weirdos and the Weirdos sounded like the Weirdos. They did not sound like the Go-Go's. They did not sound like anyone else. And then there was, you know, bands like the Dickies, and the Dickies just sounded like the Dickies, you know. And then there was, you know, X, of course, and you know, and they had sort of a slightly rootsier thing going on, just slightly, you know, but it was there, you know, the sort of rockabilly side of X via Billy Zoom. You know, everybody sounded different. It wasn't a cookie cutter thing. And the main thing was all the bands looked out for each other,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in a way. You know, there was certainly, when some acts started getting signed to major labels, things started getting a little weird. And that was sort of the very beginning of the end of the scene, you know.
Right.
But in general, yeah, you know, I mean, I'll give you an example, like with Slash Records, which was a record label we signed to. The first record on Slash was the first Germs, well, really the only Germs album.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Germs told Slash to sign X.
Oh.
And then X told Slash to sign the Blasters. And then the Blasters told Slash to sign Los Lobos and Rank and File and things like that. And that's how it kind of worked, you know. You know, the gigs were events. They were community gatherings of, okay, we're gathering the oddballs together here. You know, here are the people that don't fit into pop culture. You know, these are the people that don't, you know, in those days, you know, what you kids don't realize, you goddamn kids, what it was like back then. And, you know, it was, you know, as much as I liked, say, country rock and things like that, it had gotten sort of formulaic, you know, and pop music in general had gotten formulaic, and it had become arena-based and not club-based. And the LA scene was kind of about, you know, taking all that back, you know, one, rediscovering the you know, the roots, but also, you know, having your own voice and all that. And so, yeah, whether you were Wall of Voodoo or the Plimsouls, you know, you sounded different, but everybody was pals in a way.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture, but I'll give you an example. There used to be this bucket of blood, literally. I mean, it was a bucket of blood in Orange County called the Cuckoo's Nest. And my 64 Mustang still has, to this day, glass from a beer bottle on it, you know, embedded into the front of it from the Cuckoo's Nest. And the Cuckoo's Nest was the kind of place, the guy that ran it was slightly insane, and he had these goons, and the audience was violent. There's no other word for it. It was a bucket of blood, but it was the only place in Orange County where you could really play. Mm-hmm. And so they would have the Cramps, or they would have the Buzzcocks, but then they'd also have, you know, whatever local bands, punk rock bands playing. So one night, it was very early, very, very early in the Blasters' career, and we were opening for the Plimsouls, and the Plimsouls at this point were really huge locally, and in those days I was a bit of a drinker, and one of my rules for drinking was, you know, drink a quart or a half gallon of milk and coat your stomach, and then get to drinking, you know. So we were opening this gig, and I go to walk into the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm carrying a half gallon or a quart of milk, whatever. And the security guys are like, "No way, you can't bring that in here. It's just milk. I don't do, you know, well, you can't bring that crap in here." And you know, while 3 feet away, some skinhead is pounding the hell out of some other skinhead. Right. Really, the milk's the problem. And so I was a hothead, and I just said, "Okay, you know, screw you guys. We're not playing." Mm-hmm. And the security guys were like, "Yeah, whatever." And so then I'm walking out through the parking lot, you know, and there's people beating each other up, you know, right and left. And I see Peter Case and the Plimsouls hanging out by their car. And I go over and I was like, you know, "Screw this place, man. We're not playing." And Peter's like, "Why not?" I said, "They won't let me bring in my milk." And Peter Case goes, "Okay, screw them. We're not playing either." And so then they went and told the owner, "Yeah, we're not playing. You won't let, you know, Dave Alvin from the Blasters bring in a gallon of milk or whatever." So, you know, we're all back inside, and I got my milk inside, and everything's. But that's just a small example of how everybody kind of looked out for each other. Yeah, you know. So that was a beautiful scene. And when I became a solo act, and excuse me, when I became a solo act, that's really when I started seeing, and I was separated. You know, the LA scene had kind of collapsed and all that, and morphed into something unrecognizable. And you know, we were all those of us who survived were living on the road, and suddenly I was surrounded by acts that weren't part of that scene, and I suddenly started realizing how cutthroat this business is. You know, I could name names, but I won't. But yeah, it was suddenly like, we're not all in this together anymore. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I'm out here in the cold, hard world now.
Yeah, you didn't know that you were in the exception to the rule to begin with, rather than the rule. So in those days, like the Blasters toured a lot when they were in full swing, right? Like in the 80s.
Oh yeah.
Like, so what would a typical tour like look like? Like how were you guys traveling? What type of clubs were you playing? What did the shows look like? Like take me on a Blasters tour from the heyday when you guys were in full swing.
It is similar to now. You know, my brother Phil, the singer, was very smart in that, you know, certain friends of ours that had gotten major label deals, you know, ate up the tour support. You know, they would go for it. They'd get a bus, they'd get this, they'd get that. And my brother's like, no, there's just spending, you know, we're just spending our own money doing that stuff. We're going to be in debt.
Yeah.
So what we did, you know, is we bought vans. And so at sort of, you know, because the more we toured, the more popular we got, you know, because we were a great live act, and that really counted in those days. I mean, it still counts today, but it really counted in those days. And so we would have two vans, and oftentimes a rental car, and it was one van was to carry people, and the other van was to carry the gear. And sometimes our car was to separate various band members from each other. You know, you know, we all grew up together since childhood. So, you know, I mean, even Lee Allen, the great New Orleans tenor sax player, I knew Lee since I was 13, you know, so, you know, Johnny Baz, the bass player, I'd known all my life, and Bill Babin, the drummer, I'd known all my life, and Gene Taylor, the piano player, I knew all my life. And we all loved each other, but we would fight. But the gig-wise, you know, it depended geographically. You know, there were some parts of the country where we were huge. You know, we would do, you know, 3 nights at the Ritz in New York, you know, which held like 1,000 people. Or we do, you know, 2 nights at the Metro in Chicago. Or, you know, West Coast was kind of, you know, anywhere from, you know, averaging, you know, like 600 to 1,000 people. But, you know, then you go to Cleveland and you play a club for 300. You know, it was just, it just depended, you know. And in some of the geographic areas, you know, we were more of a line, or we would have rowdier crowds, like California, West Coast. You'd have rowdier crowds, you know. And then, you know, in other parts of the country, you'd have more of a roots crowd, more of a polite roots crowd. You know, so it just depended, you know. So you know, and then, you know, Texas is its own world. So, and we did very well in Texas. So it was, you know, we did good, you know. You know, it wasn't rocked. We weren't driving around in limousines, but, you know, we all quit our day jobs.
Right.
You know what I mean? So as far as we were concerned, everything was gravy. Right. You know, I wasn't a fry cook anymore. I was a songwriter, you know.
Hell yeah, man. That's so good. You guys were so smart not to go that direction of spending all the tour support. I remember a couple of years ago, I heard Billy Joe Shaver, God rest his soul, talking about his maxim was he was trying to talk to a younger band who kind of thought that they were hot shit. And he said, can't have a bus if you don't have a hit. That was his whole deal. You had to have a hit song. And if you didn't have a hit song, because the thing about a hit song on the radio or something, that is the only thing that can level up and make everything like the 3 Ritzes in New York. So that when you go to Cleveland, you're playing whatever the Cleveland equivalent of the Ritz is there, or Metro there. It's really hard as an independent band to hit it big everywhere, basically.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. It's we were strong in a lot of areas. As far as ticket sales and this and the other. Very strong. And then other areas, yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's good, man. And
It was a Tuesday
so
night. It was Tuesday. It was raining.
yeah, it's a Tuesday night. Yeah. Well, we used to have an expression in the Blasters that we would use when a club wasn't full. There was a pitcher for the LA Dodgers named Fernando Valenzuela.
Mm-hmm.
And when in his rookie year, he was unbeatable. And in Southern California, I forget what year this was, but 81, let's say 82. If Valenzuela was pitching, there was a noticeable decrease in attendance because everybody was watching the Dodger game.
Oh, yeah.
And so we had this, so then that just kind of carried on to, let's say we'd go to, Aardvark, Arkansas or something and play a gig and there'd be, 30 people, and you just, we'd look at each other. Well, Valenzuela's obviously pitching tonight, so it's all relative, but overall, yeah, we did great, and, we did everything, we would go on tour, we opened for Queen, we opened for Eric Clapton. We did a tour with Eric Clapton, things like that.
What the hell was it like opening for Queen? I saw that reading through. I thought that that had to be a hell of an experience.
Yeah. It was really early on in our career. We didn't have we'd only made we made one album on a very small label out of a guy's garage in Van Nuys. But the Queen guys saw us playing a gig in LA and they just said, come on a tour with us. And so, we're just dumb schmucks from Downey, California. Okay, we'll go, And suddenly we're in arena world. And I have to say that the guys in Queen were extremely nice, the nicest guys in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they treated us really well. And if I ever write a book, there'll be a couple chapters on the Queen experience.
Sure.
Because it was like, I didn't know what that was like.
Yeah.
They had the deal where, Freddie Mercury, of course, had his own room away from everyone else. And then two of the trucks, they had this fleet of semi trucks. Two of them were just the furnishings. So that they're playing sports arenas in general. And so every sports arena that they would have the same dressing room and that it was Persian rugs and, the light fixtures that, and certain sofas and chairs that were always, so wherever they went, whether it was Chicago or Seattle or, Miami, they were in the same room, and I was just like, wow, traveling with furniture, And now their audience, on the other hand, they didn't really care for us that much.
Yeah.
And it was a great bonding thing, though, for the band, especially early on. It's unbelievable how, if you have 17,000 pissed off, angry, classic rock fans booing you, throwing beer bottles and cherry bombs and a variety of, projectiles at you. And it's either going to break you up or it's going to make you stronger. And in our case, it made us stronger because, our attitude was, you paid to get here. They're paying us to be here.
Right.
So, you can, we're getting paid to play for 30 minutes. So we're playing for 30 minutes. You can throw whatever you want,
Yeah.
We don't care. We're cooler than you, and that was our Blaster rule, from then on, was never stop playing, no matter what happens, One time in Italy, we played a gig up in northern Italy, and it was sold out, and it was this old theater, and there were fortunately a lot of guys. There was a U.S. naval base nearby, And so there were a lot of American guys there, and a lot of great Italian rock. You know, Italians are really the best rock and roll audience in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And but then these brown shirt guys, these neo-fascists, broke down the door, and they're all in their little uniforms, you know, their little fascist uniforms, and they broke down the doors to this theater. And I don't know whether it was directly because of us, and whether they, you know, they saw us as, you know, American yahoos. We're going to show them a thing or two, but
Yeah.
they attacked the stage. And again, fortunately, there was a lot of American servicemen there who, yeah, hey, this is fun, you know, let's have a good time. And so it turned into this brawl and this melee, and the Italian promoter is running up to us on stage. Stop! You must stop! You must stop playing! You're driving them, making it worse. We're like, no, we're contracted to play 90 minutes, man. You know, we got 30 more to go. You know, and so we did. We just kept playing, and never, you know, that was our rule: never stop playing, no matter what, even if the brown shirts are attacking the stage. You know, which they did. I watched my brother deck some guy. It was, yeah, and keep singing. You know, you know, it was, you know. So anyway.
That's old school, man. Did it, when you came to your end of the run with the Blasters in about 86 and you were going to head out on your own, was that a scary thing to do? I mean, were you nervous about what was going to happen next, or were you just so relieved to be out of the band? I mean, what was your mindset heading into the next chapter of your career at that point?
Well, I quit the Blasters officially after a gig in Montreal. And Gene Taylor, the piano player, quit the same night. We put on the worst show we'd ever played, ever. Mm-hmm. And it was because everybody in the band was pissed off at each other for whatever reason, mm-hmm. and a variety of reasons. And so I had a gig the next night in New York City with the Knitters, which was a side project thing that I had with John Doe and Exene from X and DJ Bombre. And we were playing Irving Plaza, and I threatened to quit the Blasters before, but this was really it. And I told the guys backstage, I'm done, I'm out of here. You know, and we actually had 3 nights at the Ritz booked, you know, like 3 days later. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'll play those gigs, but that's it. You know, I'm done. I'll do the Ritz and I'm done. And I flew the next morning. I flew from Montreal to New York City and went directly to sound check. And walked in, and John Doe and Exene approached me and said, hey, we just fired Billy, because they'd been having troubles with Billy Zoom for one reason or another. And I walked in and they said, we just fired Billy. You want to join X? I said, sure. So I was only unemployed for about 12 hours.
Fair enough.
And so going solo, though, kind of developed while I was in X.
Okay.
And you know, I didn't think about it that much. If I would have thought about it, I would have chosen another career. You know, seriously, you know, it just kind of happened. And when I was playing in X, I started missing, 1, my songs, and 2, my type of music. And so I put together a little band at this, and we would play afternoons at this bar, and, you know, it wasn't open to the public. It was a little punk rock club called Raji's. And I talked to the owner. I said, hey, can I come down some afternoons and just me and, you know, blah, 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 and play? And he said, sure. Mm-hmm. And eventually he started letting people in and all that. But it was Greg Lease, Tony Gilkison was the guitar player with me. And I always dug the way Tony played. And Tony brought in Greg Lease, who Greg and I instantly became best friends. Mm-hmm. And a bass player named Gil T, a drummer named Jerry Angel, and a guy playing great harmonic player and keyboard player named John Juke Logan. And we would just go in there and do everything from blues numbers, to folk rock, to rock and roll, to country stuff. It just was like, yeah, we could just go and play whatever we wanted. And one thing led to another, and I got an offer from Demon Records over in London, which was Jake Riviera's Suspicious outfit. To they gave me X amount of dollars to make a solo record, and Steve Berlin, who had left the Blasters to join Los Lobos, but was still a very close friend, he was like trying to become a record producer. He said, "Hey, let me produce it." And I was like, "Okay," And the next thing you know, I've got a solo album, and here we are,
Yeah.
Like I said, there was no plan involved. Like Dwight Yoakam was a friend of mine long before Dwight became famous, before he got his record deal and became famous.
Mm-hmm.
But Dwight was the kind of guy that he knew, and this is true, he would talk about when he got his record deal. When I get my record deal, man, the first album's going to be this song, this song, this song, this song, this song.
Mm-hmm.
Second album's going to be this song, this song, this song. And with the exception of 2 songs, he was exactly right. He had it all planned out.
Wow.
And I'm the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I'm like, I go off what the song tells me, or what a batch of songs tells me, and then I go off of, the main thing is go back to the Blaster rule. Don't stop playing.
Yeah.
It took me when I got dropped from CBS, it took me a couple of years to recover from the shock
mm-hmm.
of I don't have a record deal. The industry had shifted to compact discs, and at that point, and so I couldn't get none of the albums that I had made with the Blasters were in print.
Mm.
They weren't on CD. My solo album was out of print. The album I'd made with X was out of print. And so I spent a couple of years recharging my batteries and kind of like trying to figure out, well, what do I do now? And then it's, well, you just keep playing, you know, and it's difficult, but it's what you got to do.
Man, I had never even thought of that in that medium change there, that you could be an artist that would be in a place where you didn't even have physical product to sell, even if you wanted to. You know what I mean?
Oh, it was the weirdest thing, because I loved record stores and all that. But yeah, none of the stuff I'd ever recorded was on CD at that point. And I didn't exist. You could go to the Slim Whitman section and there's, 80 Slim Whitman CDs, but there's not one Blasters or Dave Alvin or, this would be around 88, somewhere around in there. And it was really a low point in my life. And because I figured I'm done, I'm back to being a fry cook. But I just was stubborn, and that stubbornness is what's kept me afloat over the years, and it took me out of bad times and into good times, So again, our theme today is Dave Alvin's a very lucky guy,
Well, very lucky, but also I think that there's a lot of people who would have turned in a different direction at that point and not, been steadfast. And, I think the older I get, I'm pushing 40 now. The older I get, the more I recognize if you're able to stay steadfast with things, that's usually a good thing. That's usually going to bear fruit eventually.
Well, you would hope,
yeah.
But the thing for me is I love playing music, and I'm not the greatest at it, but what I am great at is loving doing it. I'm really good at that.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the world quite like having the right musicians at the right time playing the right song. It's just the greatest feeling with the right audience. Forget it. That's the thing that keeps me going, and I've been really fortunate to always have surrounded myself with great musicians that are better than me, and people that I learn from, anything from survival skills. Don't do this, do that, to, so that's a suspended chord, that kind of stuff. Oh, how do you finger that? Oh, that's interesting. And, it's sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No,
there.
you're good. When, you mentioned there's nothing like having the right group of musicians playing the right song at the right time for the right audience. When you think about that, it didn't have to be necessarily the top one ever, but what comes to mind? Can you think of a specific time that you look back on and you just say, man, if I could bottle that damn feeling, I would, and I could sell it all over the world. What was the song, and what was the band, and what was the venue?
Oh, it depends. It's been so many, you know. When I wrote Marie Marie,
Mm-hmm.
I'd never really written that many songs, you know.
Yeah.
And suddenly I wrote this song that I was going, that's a pretty good song.
Mm.
This is a pretty good song. How did you do that? I don't know how I did that, man. You know, asking myself those kind of questions. And so, you know, to this day, you know, you play Marie Marie, people get excited, you know. And to me, when I play the song, I go back to where I wrote the song, and I always go back to, it's the way I keep it fresh, you know, is, you know, you can change the arrangement, you can dick around here and dick around there, but I go right back to where I wrote it and when I wrote it. And so I remember taking it into the Blasters, and we played it, and and the way we did in the Blasters was I would come in and play the song and sing it like 8 or 9 times. Then my brother would listen, and then he'd start singing it. And for me, it wasn't a live gig. It was a rehearsal. When we got through Marie Marie the first time with my brother singing, I was just like, God damn, I wrote a good song. This is a really good song. Let's go play it somewhere, you know?
Yeah.
And that really, to me, that, you know, I'll always cherish that memory of that rehearsal, you know, bringing that song in, and the band is, you know, it was everything the band wanted and needed was in that song, and it was perfect for my brother's voice, and so yeah, I think I'm answering what you're saying.
Yeah,
I'm just not. Yeah,
no, that answers it. It reminds me of, and I'm going to let you go here in a minute, but that reminds me of. I just watched a documentary on when Oasis was breaking, and Noel Gallagher was talking about writing one of their really big songs, like, you know, Champagne Supernova or something like that. And he said when he brought it into his brother into band practice, he played the song, and the whole band listened to it, and his brother listened to it and goes, "You didn't fucking write that." Because, you know, they all knew at once what it was, and it was a song that was going to, like you said, you know, decades later, when you go play that song, it does the same damn thing to people that are listening to it. You know, it doesn't diminish.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've had a lot of experience. You know, bringing songs to a band is always scary. A new song.
Yeah.
And I've had every experience from. I have a song called Abilene, and when I brought it into the band, I had it at that time, and we played it through, and everybody's like, "Okay, that's a great song." But then I've also had one time, I'll never forget, a drummer. We went through a song I wrote. The drummer just goes, "You're kidding, right?" And then I was like, and then the only thing I could say is, "Yeah, I was kidding. Just testing you guys. Just testing. I'm always trying to test you, you know." Testing if you think it's a good song or not, and apparently it's not a good song.
That is brutal. That is brutal. Well,
yeah, you're kidding me, right?
Well, I sure hope very soon, with these vaccines on the way, that we'll have plenty of opportunities to have the right band and the right song and the right audience soon. I really appreciate your time, Dave. I love your music, and this means so much to have you on this show. Thank you so much.
You're a great man, Joe.
Yeah, brother.
So I'm proud to be here.
That's our show for this week. It was brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Dave Alvin's new album is entitled From an Old Guitar, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.